Okay, this one's going to be my best one. I know the most about this one. Um, a lot about the woodwind tendencies was true, and I have some experience with that one. But this one, with the brass players, this one's really tricky because the better you get, the more annoying this is going to become. So this is what got me on the kick of doing this. All the solos that I've been playing for you, I've been trying to find some YouTube examples of them, and it's really bugged me that whenever I went to go find a trombone example, that the people playing were really bad at their positions and they were really, really out of tune. So I had a student, a trombone student back at Mechaniqua, who was playing a solo for a contest, and he got marked down for not being in tune. And he said, "Well, how can that happen? How can I do that? I was tuned on a note. I had a tuning note, and I said, well, that means you weren't in tune with yourself. So that's where pitch tendency comes in with brass instruments. So each of the brass instrument, and this also with strings as well. Any kind of guitar that you play, any kind of stringed instrument. Um, Piano, not so much because that's a fixed instrument. Pianos can go out of tune, but essentially you're kind of stuck with the length of the string that you get. Um, but the string bass and cello and ukulele that we have in our band, the same pitch tendencies will happen on yours as well. So I'm going to demonstrate one thing and I'm going to kind of gab about it for a little while. So I'm going to use second position on the horn so you can see it better. So if you were to count how many I did, I went up to about 7. And then at the very end, I played the bottom. The bottom one counts as 1. So the pedal note that you hit counts as the first level. A partial is what they're called. And what I equate a partial to is a partial is just like the level of an apartment building or a high-rise building. Every floor you go up has a different level to it. So, and this dates back all the way back to Pythagoras. So I'm going to bore you with some music history a little bit. So Pythagoras was the first to discover intervals. So he had discovered that when you take a big hammer and you strike it, and then you take a hammer that is half the size of that and strike it, then it creates the interval of an octave. Well, all of that history was lost in the Dark Ages, and it wasn't again until the 13, 14, 1500s that we finally got back into music. So we're really talking about roughly about 1,000 years of history that was lost. You know, all the stuff that Socrates had done and Pythagoras had done and Plato's school, all that stuff had gotten lost. And it slowly got recovered as we learned more and more. So where we pick it back up is in the Renaissance period, where now we're playing the lute, which is a guitar, and then we're doing more with our voice, and then we're doing a lot with music in the church. So the trombone, it was known as a sackbut back then, but that one was allowed in the church. Most instruments were not allowed in the church, and this one was, and this is where these tendencies come from. So the evolution of harmony is what this boils down to, but then it translates to us as players today as why we have trouble with the pitch tendencies we do. So, you know, if you can imagine the monks, they're all learning the Bible and they're all singing the Psalms and they're getting ready to move from one activity to the other. Well, the first interval they discover is the octave. So they discovered, oh, some of the men can sing higher and some of the men can sing lower. That's our first partial. That's a perfect interval. So the first 3 are perfect, which means we really don't have a problem with those. and they're pretty well in tune. So the first three are an octave, a fourth, and a fifth. So I can have all those back in first position. I don't have to compensate for any of those. So those are the first three intervals. So octave, and then a perfect fifth, and then a perfect fourth. Those are the first intervals that we have. Now, going on from there, this is where we run into trouble. So starting from the fourth and fifth up to the seventh partial, this is where we start having trouble. Now, I mentioned before the levels of the apartment building or the high-rise building. Well, when you first start out, they all start out equal. And then as we go, the floors of the building get closer and closer and closer together. This is particularly true with French horn. French horn can play double the amount of partials than I can on a trombone. It's because the floors to their high-rise building are so close together that they can get all these same notes just on one partial, or just not even holding down. You don't have to press any buttons to get those partials. So the tendency here is when you get up to the fifth partial, it's sharp. So you have to lower the note. I'm lucky as a trombone player, I can lower my note with my slide. So if I go up 5, so between 5 and 6 and the seventh partial, those are each screwed up. So when I play a D on the trombone, if I'm in any other position but first, I have to bring that in the best I can. So I have to make sure that I'm in that the closest I can. That one is going to be flat, that third partial. Now that's the third of the chord, and high school students, Mr. Bertucci had mentioned that you're the third of the chord, you're flat. So you have to, or you're sharp, so you have to flatten that note out. Then when you get to the fifth and sixth partial, you're the opposite. So then you have to adjust and move. Now, if you're not a trombone player, you're going to have to do this with a slide. Trumpet players, if you're playing any kind of 1-3 or 2-3 or 1-2-3 combination, you're going to kick out your thumb slide and your finger slide. French horn players, you can do a lot with your tuning slides. You've got 6 of them, one for each side of the horn, plus your main tuning slide. So you can do a lot of little kind of fine tuning. For tuba players, I've seen a lot of tuba players put their opposite hand over the top so they can adjust and push and pull their tuning slides as they play. So that makes you kind of a quasi trombone player when you can push and pull those. So I covered trombone and trumpet and French horn and tuba. Baritone the same way. You can fine tune your tuning slide or your valves, but a lot of yours for baritone players has to do with your mouth. You're going to kind of do it like a woodwind player, but you don't have as many pitch tendency problems as most do. So and that, here's another boring history fact: trombone is conical, which means it starts small and it flares out. A baritone or euphonium is cylindrical, so the tubing around it, believe it or not, is supposedly the same diameter as you keep going. So when it starts at the lead pipe and goes out, it's all the same. It's all symmetrical. It's all the same diameter as it goes out to the bell. Trombone goes like a cone, so that's why we run into our problems. Trumpet the same way. Trumpet is a smaller cone. That's why we have those slides to kick out. And French horn, you might as well be a plumber because you have a ton of tubing on yours. That's why you have 6 or 7 tuning slides to work with. So those are our pitch tendencies. It's nice. It's good to be aware of those so you know how to play better in tune, especially when you're playing with someone else. And then as you get into soloistic playing like we are here these last 2 weeks, it really pays off to know what your pitch tendencies are, just so that you're in tune with yourself. So hopefully I went a little long on that one because I knew more about that one and it was a little bit more dear to my heart. But I hope some of that made sense. And I hope as you mature as a player and get better as a player, that some of those things will catch your ear. It's best if you can hear it first and then you know how to adjust. But a tuner is a great way to go about doing that. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you again tomorrow.